On August 12, 2025, the Supreme Court delivered a landmark 6-3 decision, overturning the Trump-era tariffs and fundamentally changing American trade policy. The ruling invalidates billions in duties on goods like steel, aluminum, and Chinese imports, ending a contentious era in global economic relations. More than just about tariffs, the decision redefines the constitutional limits of presidential power over international commerce. The era of unilateral, security-justified tariffs is over, forcing the U.S. to recalibrate its global economic engagement. The tariffs, once justified as protecting domestic industries, had sparked legal battles and global retaliation, raising costs for businesses and consumers. The court's intervention sets a precedent that will constrain future presidents and rebalance power between Congress and the executive on trade. The decision lifts uncertainty for global markets, but challenges remain for industries that relied on tariff protection. By striking down the tariffs, the Supreme Court reaffirms the rule of law in economic policymaking and clarifies that even national security claims must meet congressional standards. The U.S. now faces a transition to a more open, competitive marketplace, demanding careful navigation by policymakers, businesses, and workers. The Supreme Court's decision hinges on its interpretation of Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. This law lets the president impose tariffs if imports threaten national security, but the court found the Trump administration's use of it overly broad and lacking a direct security link. The justices ruled that national security can't be a catch-all for economic protectionism. There must be a clear, demonstrable threat. By closing this loophole, the court reinforces Congress's authority over foreign commerce and sets a higher bar for future presidents. The decision forces the executive to seek congressional approval or present a rigorous, defensible national security case for tariffs. American businesses that challenged the tariffs argued they were protectionist, not genuine security measures, and the court agreed. The ruling underscores that presidential power in trade is not absolute and must operate within legal boundaries set by Congress. The Supreme Court's decision has created clear winners and losers in the U.S. economy. Industries dependent on imported materials, like automakers and appliance manufacturers, immediately benefit from lower costs and greater global competitiveness. For example, a major automaker expects to save $1 billion annually with the steel and aluminum tariffs gone. Domestic steel and aluminum producers, however, now face renewed foreign competition and falling stock prices. The financial markets responded with optimism, anticipating reduced trade tensions and lower inflation. The end of retaliatory tariffs is expected to boost U.S. exports, especially in agriculture. Businesses now gain stability and predictability for long-term planning. While some industries must adapt to tougher competition, the consensus is that removing broad tariffs will lower consumer costs and foster economic efficiency. The transition may be disruptive for some, but the overall outlook is for a more stable, open trading environment. For consumers, the Supreme Court's decision means lower prices on goods like appliances, canned foods, and bicycles as tariffs disappear. The average household could see significant savings, with economists projecting a decline in living costs over the next year. Small and medium-sized businesses lacking the resources to absorb tariff costs are among the biggest winners, gaining relief and new opportunities to grow. Sectors like craft brewing and custom fabrication will especially benefit from cheaper materials. However, domestic industries that expanded under tariff protection now face a tougher market and must pivot to compete on quality and innovation. Some may need government support for retraining and modernization. The ruling forces businesses to shift from relying on government protection to market-driven strategies. In the long run, this could foster a more resilient, innovative industrial base. The business community now faces a more predictable but demanding global marketplace. The Supreme Court's decision is a diplomatic turning point, mending ties with key U.S. allies like the EU, Canada, and Mexico. These partners, once hit by U.S. tariffs and retaliatory measures, now welcome the ruling as a step toward restoring a cooperative, rules-based order. Retaliatory tariffs on American goods are already being lifted, easing years of trade conflict. The decision gives U.S. diplomats renewed credibility and strengthens Western alliances. With allies, the U.S. can now focus on shared priorities: climate, security, and countering unfair trade practices, especially from China. The U.S.-China relationship remains complex. The ruling doesn't resolve deeper issues like intellectual property theft or subsidies. The U.S. will likely pivot to multilateral strategies, working with allies through the WTO and coordinated actions. The court's decision pushes U.S. trade policy away from unilateralism and toward alliance-driven solutions for global challenges. The Supreme Court ruling sharply curtails presidential authority over trade, restoring the constitutional balance of power. By narrowing the national security justification, the court removes a key tool for unilateral executive action on tariffs. Future presidents must now seek congressional approval or present a clear direct security threat to impose trade barriers. This shift ensures a more collaborative, transparent, and stable approach to trade policy. Congress may now revisit and clarify trade laws, further defining executive limits. The era of the imperial presidency in trade is checked. The president's role is now firmly within a legal, legislative framework. Major trade decisions will require public debate and bipartisan consensus, reducing abrupt policy swings. The ruling strengthens democratic oversight and the institutional foundations of U.S. trade policy. The Supreme Court's decision has sparked intense political debate in Washington. Democrats and free market Republicans celebrate it as a win for the rule of law and economic stability, while Trump and his allies condemn it as a betrayal of American workers. The Biden administration, having reviewed but maintained some tariffs, now has legal cover to dismantle them and pursue alliance-based strategies. The administration must balance relief for consumers and businesses with concerns from labor unions and manufacturing sectors. Industry groups are divided. The Chamber of Commerce and retailers praise the ruling, while steelmakers and some unions warn of job losses. The decision is likely to become a flashpoint in upcoming elections, with both sides framing it as central to America's economic future. The ruling exposes deep divisions over whether trade policy should prioritize global integration or domestic protection. Washington now faces the challenge of crafting a new trade vision that supports jobs without resorting to unlawful unilateral measures. The Supreme Court's decision sets U.S. trade policy on a new, rules-based path. Unilateral tariffs are out. Diplomatic negotiation and multilateral agreements are in. American industries must now innovate and compete globally, no longer shielded by broad tariffs. Government policy may shift from protectionism to supporting competitiveness through R&D, workforce training, and infrastructure. The ruling encourages bipartisan, collaborative trade policymaking, producing more stable, consensus-driven policies. The result, a more dynamic, resilient economy and stronger international partnerships. The U.S. is steered away from economic nationalism and back toward global leadership and open markets. The challenge ahead is to address complex issues, especially with China, through negotiation and alliances, not confrontation. The Supreme Court's decision overturning the Trump-era tariffs marks a turning point in U.S. economic history. It redefines presidential power, brings relief to consumers and importers, and resets international relationships. The ruling compels a return to Congress-led policymaking and negotiation-based trade strategies. America now faces a more predictable, open, and competitive global marketplace. The decision moves the U.S. away from economic nationalism and toward a rules-based, integrated global order. While some sectors will face challenges, the overall impact is a stronger, more resilient economy. The central question now: how can the U.S. develop new effective tools to address unfair trade practices and protect strategic interests, without resorting to blunt, unilateral tariffs? The answer will shape the next era of American trade policy.